And they're very fine essays indeed. And the book was translated by Mabel, who is a Sydney sinologist. Now, for the following two books, the authors are in this room. And I would like to recognize David Schneider, who's the author of the next book I'm going to talk about. Professor at UMass. And he's the person who rescued my brother in Yale after they were stuck behind a cattle car for 15 minutes. Cattle train. So David's book is Confucian Prophet, Political Thought in Du Fu's Poetry, 752 to 757. Okay, you know there's a ton of books about Du Fu. It's like Shakespeare. How many books are there about Shakespeare? There are that many books about Du Fu, including in English, there are a lot. So it's pretty hard to say something new about Du Fu, but David has. And the earlier studies of Du Fu have tended to read his poetry as personal expressions of emotion, a practice that sets up an interpretive scheme that assumes a set of truisms about Du Fu the man. This inhibits the ability to see how the poet may actually be working out philosophical problems or taking rhetorical positions within a system of thought, rather than expressing selected tenets of that system uncritically. So in his first chapter, David uses the work of J.G.A. Pocock and Quentin Skinner on language as authority. And also in his book, he talks about the Confucian tradition as explicated by people like Ted DeBerry and Julia Ching. So this is a book that looks at the thought of Du Fu and probes very deeply about how that thought is a reflection of Du Fu's values and expresses his life. Now the final book in our series, but well, for this up to this point, we're going to have a lot more. And the author is also in this room, and that is E.K. Tan. Would you please stand up? Are you from Singapore?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to make a confession that sometimes when I have students from Singapore in my class, I say, are you from Malaysia? And if I have students from Malaysia in my classes, I'll say, are you from Singapore? And both sides get really upset. Okay, so I think I got you pegged right. E.K. Tan from Singapore. Okay? But, okay, now when we come to E.K. Tan and the book that he wrote, this is the real core of Sinophone studies. And I have to confess that I'm stretching the boundaries and the limits of Sinophone studies by what I put into it. It's a very elastic concept for me. And as long as Shumei agrees and doesn't shoot me, I'll keep putting any book that I think is interesting that has to do with Chinese language or Chinese culture, I'll try to squeeze it in if it's really good, okay? So his really belongs because it's the heart of Sinophone studies. It's called Rethinking Chineseness, Translational Sinophone Identities in the Nanyang Literary World. Nanyang means essentially Southeast Asia, I hope you would agree, Southeast Asia. So I hope you know that there are a lot of Chinese people living in Southeast Asia, and Chinese have been going to Southeast Asia for many, many centuries. So it's a two-way street. And this book examines the relationship between the Nanyang Chinese, their original homelands, Borneo, Malaysia, and Singapore, and their imaginary homeland, China, through the works of writers such as Guo Baokun, Zhang Guixing, and Vivian Luo. The increasing international scholarly interest in works by these individuals, part of an ever-growing Sinophone canon, draws a critical attention to the politics of identity formation in transnational discourses of ethnicity and identity. Although these works in concomitant discourses have generated a great deal of interest in Asia, they remain largely unexplored in English language scholarship. So our series is really going to be the showcase for Sinophone literature, and it's going to be introducing this kind of literature that before this time has really been falling through the cracks. It wasn't in mainland, it wasn't in Taiwan, it wasn't in Hong Kong, but it certainly is down there in Southeast Asia, and we really need to look at it seriously if we're going to understand what China is now, what should I say, the Sinosphere, what the Sinosphere is. We have to study this Sinophone literature very, very carefully, because it's not the same thing as Chinese literature. It's something unto itself, and we have to thank Shumei for really bringing this to light in training a first generation of scholars to work on this kind of literature. So I'm proud of this series, and I'm proud of all the authors and the books that they have appeared in it, and above all, I'm grateful to Tony Tan for making it a reality.